Hello everyone.
Hello.
It is nice to speak to you again after a week. Tom, how's your week been?
My week has been very good, thanks, Sam. Yeah, it's been much the same. Lots of good teaching, lots of good script writing for videos and that sort of thing, etc., etc. Plans for the future with Britsent. You, Sam?
Yeah, it's been great. Nice week. I've had some wonderful chats with different students.
Likewise.
It's been a fun week. Enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed watching a certain film, which we are going to discuss today. As we mentioned last time, this is going to be a Parasite special podcast. So we're going to be talking about the film, which has had a very big impact in Korea and in the rest of the world. I saw the film very recently, and I think, Tom, you saw it very recently too?
Very recently.
It was fantastic. I loved it. I thought it was a brilliant film. I haven't seen a film as good as this for a long time. I'm sure, as anyone listening to this knows, it's had very good reviews. Most people who have seen it have enjoyed it or said that they thought it was brilliant. Tom, what was your first impression?
Like you, Sam, I loved it. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. The first impression I got was about the cinematic qualities. Before I thought about the subtle messages of the film, I was struck by the beauty of the cinematography, the rhythm of the plot, which was brilliant, the emotional responses the film inspired in me, which were entertainment, amusement, horror, fear, delight, disgust, shock, etc. Many strong adjectives to describe my feelings. It was just an incredibly enjoyable film experience. It's like being in the hands of a master, Bong Joon-ho, who has received so many accolades because of this film. I think everyone now acknowledges him as a master of the craft. What were your first thoughts about it, Sam?
Well, I was blown away by the film. It really had a big effect on me. Just the themes in it were, I thought, amazingly well explained and examined. It gave me an insight into Korean culture that I hadn't really had before. It helped me to understand some parts of Korean society, I think. And like you said, the cinematography of it was fantastic. Also, I thought the way that the movie doesn't have one genre, doesn't have one style. It kind of has three, I think. The three genres it includes. First of all, I'd say there's drama.
Yes.
Second of all, comedy.
Certainly.
Thirdly, I'd probably say thriller or horror. One of those two.
I would agree.
So you've got some very funny moments. You've got a lot of dramatic and serious moments.
Bit of love.
Yeah, lots of love. Yeah. Lots of division and politics too are involved. And obviously there's some quite violent parts as well. We should say also at this moment that if you haven't seen Parasite, then
Stop listening.
Stop listening now, because we are going to discuss the story. But do go and watch it.
There will be spoilers.
Exactly. Tom, I talked a bit about how it helped me to understand Korean society. What do you think it says? What do you think the film says about Korean society?
Well, I think it says many things. Perhaps the most significant thing it says, which affirmed many of the things I've heard from my students in conversations over the past year or so, is the extreme economic inequality and social inequality that exists in South Korean society, as exists in most developed countries at the moment, and indeed developing countries. Basically in most countries, inequality is growing exponentially. This is very clearly depicted in the film through the comparison between the two families. One family living in poverty, quite severe poverty, another family living in extreme wealth, so much wealth that they can actually hire other people to do work for them. Also, there are the subtle dynamics at play when these two classes of people mix. So the housemaid, both the former housemaid and the woman who takes her place from the poor family, the film really plays with that classic dynamic between the servant class and the owner class, the master class, where the servants look to the master for help, money, support, comfort, security, any of those things which the master can provide. Of course, there are many parts of the film that draw this out, but I always remember the scene where the father of the poor family is dressed up as a Native American with the man of the house. The father is clearly reluctant to go through with the game that the owner of the house is asking him to play on his son. And then the owner of the house reminds the man that he is being paid to do this. This is part of his work. And it's that kind of ownership that's brought out. And I think in many class dynamics, they play out the relationship between slave and owner. And of course, when one thinks of class, one also often thinks of Karl Marx, his work on that dynamic between paying someone for work and owning them, seeing a relationship between those two things. How about you, Sam? What did the film tell you about Korean society in this way?
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of what you said. I think it shows the divisions between classes in Korean society. It also shows the attitudes that people have in each class. Like you said about the employer of the father, how he kind of says to the father, like, you're being paid for this, so you need to do it. It's that attitude of expecting things to be done for you, how you view people who work for you as your property, like you said. They have to do things for you a certain way because you're paying them, and that means that you have complete control over them. So there's definitely that attitude. And there's also the attitude of the family and how they are not like a perfect family in any way. It's not a film that tries to say that, oh, this poor working class family, they are so lovely, and yet, you know, people are so nasty to them. It's not as simple as that. It shows that people who are in very difficult situations make bad decisions because of their situation, and they have to do some sort of bad things, some difficult things to survive. So you can see that the family is very sneaky. That's part of the comedy of the film, is that this family sneakily managed to all get jobs and have to pretend that they don't know each other with this rich family. But it shows the fact that they do that and that they have to do that shows the kind of situation they're in. You can see they also fight with the other maid who had worked there before. She is in a similar situation to them. She is also quite poor. They end up fighting with her. It shows in a way that people, when they're poor or in very difficult situations, end up having to do very, very difficult things, have to make very difficult decisions and end up fighting with each other, whilst generally the people who employ them are having a much easier life. Not a perfect life, but a much easier life by comparison. But another thing that I noticed is, and I'm sure you noticed it too, Tom, is the way that the man in the basement, who is the husband of the old maid, accepts his position. And he's quite happy in the basement, although it's quite an unpleasant situation. He accepts it. How do you think that connects to Korean society, or what do you think that says about society?
Not only Korean society, I think it probably says something about all class relations in society. There's always that conflict between people who try to change their position and people who try to accept their position. So there's always that conflict between changing and accepting. And I think that's also brought out, and of course that the man in the basement is clearly someone who's accepting his position. In fact, he loves his position. He pleads for the poor father to leave him there, Mr. Kim. And there's also the character of Mr. Kim, who becomes symbolic at different times of different things, including the helplessness, the hopelessness of that position, which is particularly shown when his family are washed out of their home by the floods, and he's lying next to his son, who says, "What's your plan?" And he says, "There is no plan. If you don't have a plan, you can never fail," etc., etc., etc. And it's a kind of hopelessness. It's a sense of hopelessness. There's no point in planning for anything. You can't plan for anything. You have no control over your life. And I think that's a sense of helplessness that is often felt by people in such circumstances, in such poverty. Whereas again, we see the young characters have a kind of relentless, active imagination, a relentless striving to change their position, led by the son and then by the brilliant daughter, who they kind of make things happen. So it's a sort of revolutionary ideology.
Definitely, yeah. And I think especially it's especially interesting what you said about the plan and the helplessness, because I think that's all comes together at the very end of the film, because the son, after all of the different things that happen with the father and the violence and the son having a head injury, he eventually develops his own plan at the very end. It's not a happy ending, exactly, because we don't know exactly what happened, really. It shows that the son has made a plan, and it shows what he wants to happen, what he dreams will happen, where he makes enough money to buy the house that has his father in, where his father has stayed in the basement, and they can be reunited. They can be a family again. However, the film is quite clever in the way that it doesn't show this happening. It shows him dreaming about it. So we don't know whether it happened. So it shows that the son still has a plan and he is struggling to make things happen. But it also shows the reality that it might not happen. And it shows how difficult it is to change things when everything is against you and the system is against you. And so that's why I thought the ending was really interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
Really powerful, yeah. Another thing about Korean society that I learned was the way that Koreans speak to each other. So I noticed in particular the way that they speak to each other when they are addressing one another. There are a few moments where one character calls another character sister or sis for short. This is the English translation, of course. And that was really interesting for me as someone who's interested in language. It shows the way that Koreans communicate and interact with people from the same class and from different classes as well. So you can also see them using much more respectful language when they are speaking to the employers. You can see the family speaking to their employers in quite a respectful way, and the employers speaking to them in a more casual and much less respectful way, because obviously they are in a position of power. Did you notice anything about the use of language in this way?
I think a lot of the film is to do with kind of crossing lines and boundaries. Actually, quickly, I heard firstly from a student today that Bong Joon-ho is known as Details. I think he has a nickname meaning details or man of details or something.
Really?
Yeah, because apparently he's obsessed with details. And that was something I noticed in the film was, well, firstly, of course, the incredible way the plot comes together. Everything seems to have a reason and connects. It all works so perfectly. It's so tightly constructed. But also, in line with that, there's a clear focus in the film on divisions and boundaries and the kind of invisible lines that separate people, both economically, but also in terms of customs. The way the characters behave with each other when they're in each other's company sends a lot of messages in the film. For example, the way the male employer warns Mr. Kim about saying too much or going beyond the line, and then later talks to his wife about saying he sometimes gets close to saying too much, but he stops just before the line. So there's a sense of the limitation that the poorer characters have to live under. There are things that they just can't say. There are ways of behaving that they have to adhere to, that they have to follow, rules of behavior. And a nice contrast is made with the daughter as the art teacher, who starts kind of commanding the house. That's her kind of power. She tells the mother what she has to do. You need to go over there. You need to leave the room. I only teach alone with the boy. And also telling the maid to leave her and the mother alone. And that's part of the beginning of the characters starting to kind of reach across those invisible lines and kind of seize control of the house from their inferior social positions. And I think each character does that in their own way until it reaches a very violent conclusion. It's
like we talked in a previous podcast a bit about etiquette. And I think that's really important in this film as well. How people deal with etiquette. And like you said, the daughter in some ways completely ignores etiquette in the way that she commands the house, like you said. It would be really interesting to try and think about if there are any British or maybe American films which explore similar themes about etiquette specifically and how people reach across etiquette or how people deal with etiquette.
There is one film that actually, just as you were saying that, sprung to my mind. Luis Buñuel, who's a Spanish European director in the 70s, it was very prominent in the 60s and 70s, made a very famous film called the discreet charm of the bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie meaning the kind of people in power, as opposed to the proletariat, which is Marx's term for the working classes, the urban working classes usually. And the discreet charm of the bourgeoisie is about a group of very wealthy people having dinner, but they find that they can't leave the room, and slowly the manners and the etiquette dissolves, breaks down into anarchy and chaos until they turn into sort of savages.
Yeah.
There are, I think, echoes of that in Parasite, where the kind of immaculate house and everything must be perfect. The tutors must be perfect. The situation must be perfect. The food must be perfect. All kind of slowly breaks down until we're left with that savage, violent, animal-like ending. It's
really interesting, to think if Parasite was a European film or a British film, what it would be like. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying we should remake it because...
No, please don't.
I know there was an American remake of Oldboy.
Oh my goodness.
Why? Wasn't good. In my opinion.
Anyway. Leave it alone.
So, but it would be interesting to think about what that would be like and think about the different forms of etiquette that we have here and how they connect to class and positions in society. So I think overall, like we've talked about, it was a really, really impressive snapshot of Korean society, but I don't think it's just about Korean society. I think it's about bigger themes as well. And I think it's a film which people from any culture can enjoy and relate to. So overall, I would just say go and see it, really experience it yourself if you haven't seen it. And I've heard that if you watch it a second or a third time, you notice things you didn't notice before. It actually gets better, some people say. How about you, Tom? What was your overall?
I definitely intend to see it again. Overall, I agree with everything you've said, Sam. I think it's absolutely brilliant on every level. Plot, directing, the acting is phenomenal. We haven't really talked about the actors, but I thought
that's true. Yeah,
absolutely superb.
Brilliant.
The writing and the impact it will have. I know Korean cinema has been very strong for a long, long time, but to be the first, not only the first Korean film to win the Best Picture Oscar, but also the first foreign language film to win the Best Picture Oscar is extraordinary and is a good sign, because I think the Oscars are often seen as fairly American-centric and Anglo-centric. And this will bring a more diverse audience, more diverse actors, more diverse directors, more diverse film creators to the world of film and bring their attention forward. So the word of the podcast is bourgeois. Bourgeois means usually the middle class, mostly the upper middle class of society, and sometimes the upper class to some people of society. And it means all the values, all the behaviours associated with that class of people. Parasite clearly tackles the bourgeois society, examines it, dissects it, attacks it in some ways, and reveals the class problems in Korean society. So Sam, if I say the poor family in Parasite was so bourgeois, would that be a correct use of the word bourgeois or not?
No, it would be an incorrect use of the word bourgeois.
Spot on, because they're extremely poor and from the working class.
We're now going to just mention a few comments from the previous video. And the first is from Zae Kim. Zae Kim said, I think it would be beneficial for you to review Parasite. Well, Zae Kim, I'm sure you're happy after listening to this. Well, thank you, first of all, for the suggestion, because it's something that we've done now. Like you said, I think it will be quite beneficial and it's certainly been fun.
Yeah, very fun for us. Hopefully fun for you too.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for that. It's a really helpful comment.
And the comment I'm going to read, this is a translated name, so I'm so sorry if it's completely wrong, but it was translated phonetically as Bouleyon. Bouleyon. That could be completely wrong. I'm sorry. Bouleyon's commented saying, very helpful contents to enhance my poor English. Thank you. That's our pleasure. This is aiming to be an educational podcast. So if it is helpful for you to enhance your English, that's great. We're always looking to improve it. And we do take your comments on board and try to adapt and improve as we go along. And I'm sure we will get better and better. But thank you very much for engaging and thank you for commenting. And again, as always, please do tell us if there's anything you'd like us to talk about in the future.
It would be great if you can leave some comments, especially about Parasite, of course, and anything that we missed or that we didn't notice or didn't discuss. Or if there are any other themes that you think are really important in the film that you want to tell us about, that'd be really helpful if you can write a comment, tell us what you think about the film. Let's look at some of the language that we've talked about today and that we've used. One phrase I used was blown away. When we use blown away, we use it to say that we are amazed by something or to express that something was incredible. We would use it to talk about films, to talk about music, to talk about anything that makes us feel amazed. So I could say, for example, I listened to a fantastic song last night. It blew me away. I was blown away by it. I could also say, for example, the stars look beautiful tonight. I'm blown away. So Tom, if I say I went to a restaurant last night, a lovely Italian restaurant, and you ask me, Sam, how was the food? And I say, it was fantastic. I was blown away by it. Does that mean that I thought the food was average and pretty normal? Or does it mean that I think the food was amazing?
It means you think the food was amazing.
Absolutely.
The expression I chose is master of his craft. Master is used as a kind of ungendered word, so it can be used master of her craft, master of his craft, etc. If someone is a master of their craft, it means they are an expert. They are at the top level of whatever it is they do. It could be making films, it could be cooking, it could be a surgeon. If they are a master of their craft, that means they are at the top level of their craft. So, Sam, if I say, Sam, you're not a good painter.
True.
Does that mean you're a master of your craft, painting? Or does it mean you're not?
It means I'm not, I think.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, not a good painter. Never have been.
Shame. Should practice more.
Can't be bothered.
Touche.
We hope you've enjoyed our review, our very long podcast review of Parasite and everything that we've discussed. We will talk to you again next week. And thank you very much for listening. Have a great week.
Yes, thank you very much for listening. Take care.